Good afternoon. I want to thank you all for joining us today for this update and conversation around your questions. We have students, faculty, staff, parents, and family members, as well as some members of our alumni community on today. And anytime that we can all be together, especially during these times, it's a special moment for our community. You all may know that this week we're celebrating Founders Day, when AU was chartered by the U.S. Congress 128 years ago. This is a time when we connect our past to our future, where we learn from our history, build on our successes, and look forward together as an incredible community. With that spirit in mind, I want to start by saying thank you. This has been an extremely hard year professionally and personally. And while there's light at the end of the tunnel with vaccines being rolled out and our own plans to return to campus in the fall, we must continue to protect each other and ourselves through basic public health measures like wearing masks, physical distancing, and following the latest health and safety guidelines. As we act as a community, that is, this together and supporting each other, we must also take care of ourselves, including resting and recharging. And I know how committed we all are. We truly believe in our mission and our purpose. And it's one of my favorite parts about being a part of this community. But we also need to take care of ourselves too, especially now. So please find what works for you and remember to use the resources available through the university. Throughout the last year, our community has shown resilience, ingenuity, and compassion for each other and our broader world, and I am grateful. Today, I want to talk about where we've been, where we're going, and our transition to a post-COVID world. Let's begin with our strategy, Changemakers for a Changing World, which builds on our mission, vision, and values, as well as the core strengths of the university. I'm going to admit that I didn't know just how much change would be coming our way when we decided on that name for our strategy. A good strategy serves as an organization's North Star. It points us in the right direction, guides the use of resources, and gives us a reference point when we are all buffeted by the winds of change. It reflects the values that connect a community and helps put them into action. A strategy also serves as a solid foundation when things change all around us, which certainly has been the case in this last year. We are facing a devastating combination of three crises: a health crisis, an economic crisis, and a crisis of racial injustice. I've learned that in challenging times, the best things an organization can bring often is clarity, clear communications, clear goals, and clear decisions. When COVID-19 first hit, we focused on three core principles to guide our decision-making during these crises. First and most fundamentally, safeguard the health and well-being of our community. Second, continue to advance our educational and research mission. And third, be forces for good in contributing to the overall response in the DC region and beyond. By focusing on our strategy and these core principles and working together as a community, we maintained our momentum and in some places accelerated it. American University entered the U.S. News and World Report's most innovative universities rankings for the first time this year at number 35. We're also number 25 for undergraduate learning, number 11 for study abroad, and number 43 for the first year experience. Washington College of Law Professor Amanda Frost's book, You Are Not American: Citizenship, Stripping from Dred Scott to the Dreamers, was placed on the New York Times New and Noteworthy list in January. Two SIS students, Zizone Luau and Tammy Nguyen, have been selected as fellows for the prestigious Rangel Fellowship, marking the first time that AU has had two fellows named at once. Mark Feist, our Assistant Director of Grounds, Vehicle Maintenance, and Support Services, is now the new president of the National Professional Grounds Management Society. And alum Sarah McBride recently made history for being elected as the first transgender state senator in the nation. These are just a few of the many ways that we see that momentum. Because of the incredible work across our community, we are continuing on a forward trajectory and gaining speed. A key part of our path forward is our finances. This is an extremely challenging time for higher education, but we've made decisions to mitigate the impact on our people and our mission. We first told you in May that we projected a 2-year impact on our finances and operations. As time moves on, we're confirmed in the approach of considering 2 years of financial impact. Based on current information and our preparation for a wide spectrum of contingencies, we're working through financial impacts of up to $100 million in lost revenue and increased costs in our current fiscal year. Our response to this fiscal situation sought to prioritize the well-being of our community through these unprecedented times. We adopted a 10% AU Community of Care discount to help and support our students and their families for this academic year. We provided a $13 million increase to financial aid, and we covered our portion of healthcare for our contract employees because it aligns with our values. While we used budget reserves and endowment income to cover more than 40% of the financial shortfall, those decisions required other hard choices, and everyone across our entire community made sacrifices to support our community as a whole. I want to thank everyone for your work to get through this time. As we move forward and begin the transition to a post-COVID world, it is exciting to note that we're on track to return to face-to-face learning and in-person activity on our beloved campus. In fact, exactly 1 week from today, our mid-semester residential experience will begin. 549 additional students will move onto campus, more than 90% of whom are first-year students. We're also on a path to return to campus in the fall. Based on the current trajectory of the pandemic, the rollout of vaccines, and our health and safety practices. With this next exciting step forward, we're building on the lessons of the last year in terms of virtual learning and remote work, and we are taking those lessons into account as we incorporate them into our future operations. All of these actions at this critical, exciting, and hopeful juncture help us to maintain and advance our momentum against our strategy as we continue to build on our foundation for the future. An essential part of that forward progress is our finances and our focus on student thriving. While our 1-year budget bridge is still being finalized, I hope you saw my memo to the community on Monday that after considering the impact of COVID-19 on our students and families, there will be no tuition or resident hall rate increases in the coming year, for the first time in AU history. The tuition and resident hall rates will go back to the original levels set in the fiscal year 2021 budget. We made this move to support our students and their families, especially after the challenges of last year. We remain deeply committed to the student experience and to ensuring that we continue to invest in our students, including making sure that key services for our students remain a priority. Part of the work ahead means that we'll need to focus intently on enrollment, retention, and expense management, and capitalize on the opportunities before us. This year, we saw the second highest number of undergraduate applications in our history and a 20% increase in graduate applications. This is during the time of COVID when recruiting students is a significant challenge. We should all be encouraged by this momentum, but we have much work ahead of us to bring those students to AU. Preserving the existing tuition levels means that there will be pressure on our faculty and our staff. More than 90% of our revenue comes from tuition, housing, and fees. The hiring freeze is still in effect, and we must be vigilant about our expense savings. I know how hard you all are working, and I know the sacrifices that our faculty and staff have made. And it's because of that work that we are on a path to resume university contributions to employee retirement plans and the annual merit pool in the next fiscal year. And we are currently not planning further COVID-19 related furloughs to the budget. While it's been a difficult year, American University persevered by living our values and supporting our people, which was critical in a world of economic uncertainty and where higher education has suffered more than 650,000 layoffs. There are bright spots like the 19,500 applications for this fall and the incredible learning, scholarship, and community that we have to offer here at American University. We all have a role to play as AU ambassadors, and we have an extraordinary story to tell about where we are and where we're going. And that brings me to another piece in our trajectory to support our strategy, the comprehensive campaign, a philanthropic effort to expand our scholarly influence, enhance the student experience, and be a model for inclusion and innovation. Even during this challenging year, we've continued to make progress and gain support for our strategy and its goals through philanthropic contributions. We're incredibly appreciative of the support that we've received from many of our alumni that have gotten us to the halfway point in our campaign goal. Our public launch in May will accelerate our efforts to get further support to meet the urgent challenges of the day and create knowledge for the good of society. As I mentioned earlier, this is Founders Week, and the Founders Day Challenge is currently underway until 7 p.m. tonight, and I have just gotten the word that during this forum, we've actually hit our Founders Day Challenge goal of 1,000 donors, which unlocks a $50,000 gift from Alumni Board President Jonathan Mathis. You'll learn more about the campaign in the coming weeks, but I wanted to give you an update on it because there's going to be a role for everyone in our community to play in our campaign work, as well as the work we do to recruit, retain thriving students. The widespread interest in AU, both from prospective students as well as philanthropically, is a testament to every single member of our community as we write this next chapter of AU together. You may have seen that recently we marked the 2-year anniversary of our strategic plan and the launch of years 3 to 5 of our Inclusive Excellence Plan. Members from across the university came together to create this foundation. And while we still have much work to do, we're seeing progress. Scholarship, learning, and community, the 3 pillars of our strategy. And it is truly that third component, community, that we believe sets us apart, because to us, community is both a means and an end. It's how we respond to challenging times, and it is our calling to build stronger communities. I was recently asked, what was your professional highlight of 2020? And I responded with how AU came together as a community. I've been so inspired by our community, and especially our students. Early this week, some of you probably saw KPU Founders Week and the Women's Initiative welcome Stacey Abrams back to AU for Black History Month. And you'll recall that she first spoke at AU in 2019 as one of our commencement speakers. It's a testament to the power and promise we hold as change makers. We're ahead of the curve. We don't just see the future, we take charge and write the future we want. This forum is a continuing part of building community, and there will also be individual forums after this one today for students, faculty, and staff in the coming weeks. And we're going to announce those dates soon. I'm grateful to each of you and every member of this community. So I close where I began. Thank you. I know we have a number of questions that we'd like to answer, so I'm going to stop there. And we collected those questions. And before we get to the questions, I want to make sure that I introduce the cabinet. I think many of you all know these folks, but not sure that everyone does. So I want to introduce everyone. Peter Starr, our acting provost and chief academic officer. Fanta, who's our vice president of campus life and inclusive excellence and has led our COVID response during this time. Matt Bennett, who's the Vice President and Chief Communications Officer. Traevena Byrd, I hope everyone is waving. Traevena Byrd, Vice President and General Counsel and our Board Secretary. Seth Grossman, Vice President of People and External Affairs and Chief of Staff. Doug Kudravetz, our Vice President and Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer. Steve Munson, the Vice President and Chief Information Officer. Courtney Surls, the Vice President for Development and Alumni Relations, and Billy Walker, our Director of Athletics and Recreation. With that, Matt, I'm going to turn to you because I know we have received a lot of questions, and so why don't we dive into those questions?
Great. Thank you, Sylvia, and thank you to all of you for submitting questions. We had a Great submission of important topics that we wanted to cover today. And the first one, Sylvia, is what will fall operations look like, including our classes and working arrangements?
So as we think about those fall operations, I think one of the places to start is the learning that we have done over the year in terms of determining what things are going to look like. And that learning that we have done over the past year is learning about COVID. It is learning from actions and activities that we've done, and it is learning from many other institutions. I think you know probably that right now in the Patriot League, a number of other universities are having different experiences right now, and we are learning from all of that. The second thing is we think about how we're going to go forward for this fall planning and what's it really going to look like. Those three guiding principles I just mentioned in the remarks, the issue of number one, the health and safety of our community. Number two, our core mission of learning and scholarship. And number three, how we are making sure that we fit into the broader community here in DC and even more broadly in terms of fighting the pandemic will guide what we're doing. So as we think through all of that, what we know are a couple things. One, we're going to return to our students being face-to-face. Two, we're going to return to a residential experience for our students. And number three, that will mean that we'll have changes in terms of the return and what the work for our staff and faculty look like. As we think about all of those things, I want to say a couple of things. One is we do not have all of the answers right now. And part of what we've tried to do during all of COVID is create a practice and an approach where we talk about what we know when we know it, but at the same time, we are gathering input from the community. And that's a big part of what those additional forums will be about, is making sure there's an opportunity and additional webinars where people in different kinds of groups are able to create and give input. One of the things we're going to be informed by are the learnings that we've all done around digital. When is that helpful? When is it something that adds value? What we want to do is take the learnings from the COVID period and apply those as we go forward. With that, as we think about these questions, I want to turn to Seth and see if you have anything to add, and then Peter will come to you.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add, Sylvia, to build on what you said, is that we have planning underway, and the planning is all for the staff and faculty work is all driven to create models that support what you laid out, supporting the return to in-class instruction and the residential experience and the work that goes around that. And as we're doing that, we're going to draw on the lessons we've learned over the past year, and we're going to consult widely with staff and faculty to understand what folks' experiences were in a variety of ways, including through a survey, to make sure we get broad-based input. We're going to draw on best practices from other institutions who have more experience both in pandemic and non-pandemic times with different kinds of work models. We are going to, of course, be driven, as you said, Sylvia, by the latest and developing guidance on health and safety. So we're working towards that, and sort of our guiding star are twofold. One, we'll be in regular communication and engagement with folks so people know, have opportunities to provide their feedback in a variety of ways, and they know where we are in the process. And two, just as we're thinking about it, sort of a shorthand we use is that it's our expectation that fall, when we come back in August, it will not look like certainly what things look like now, but it will also not look like what things looked like in February of 2020 before we went on extended telework. So we're charting new territory, and we think that there's a lot of opportunity there, and so much more to come on this subject in the coming weeks and months.
Peter, do you want to add anything?
Absolutely, Sylvia, and let me start by thanking everybody for all the efforts of the past nearly a year. It's been an extraordinarily heavily lift, and I think as a community, as Sylvia has said many times, and once again today, we have come together on behalf of our students and our community, and that's something that I and everyone on this call really deeply appreciate. I do want to talk about face-to-face and the importance of face-to-face, particularly from a faculty perspective. We know that our students come to American University because the experiences they can have on our campus and in our city. So the return to face-to-face is absolutely critical to who we are, the very depth of our ethos, and to speak like the business person that I sometimes feel like I'm becoming, our value proposition. But at the same time, we've also learned some very interesting things about digital learning. Our new Chief Online Officer, Joseph Riquelme, is doing a new digital learning strategy. And so we have to understand that we can't just be haphazard in the way we bring ourselves back face to face and in our classrooms. We have to consider this move and the growth of online capabilities in the classrooms in the context of the extraordinary powerful push for our students and their families to come back to the classroom. We'll have more on this in the months and weeks to come around what classes will remain online, largely big classes. But we need to think that we're going to be back in the classroom delivering that powerful face-to-face experience that our students want always and that they really want now.
Thank you, Peter. Matt, do you want to go to the next one?
Yep. Our next question is, how will American University manage COVID testing, vaccinations, and other health protocols when students, faculty, and staff fully return to campus?
Matt, thanks. And thanks to everybody for submitting questions. You know, this is an event, I'm looking actually at the numbers, there are almost 1,100 of us on. And so figuring out ways, and so all of you all who submitted questions, I think, you know, Matt we kind of, I think folks have combined some of the questions in terms of that. That has a number of different pieces and parts to it. But thanks, first of all, to everybody for submitting questions. It's really helpful to know what's on people's mind and a helpful way, even in large groups, that we can have some form of dialogue in terms of talking about what people want to talk about. So thanks to everybody who did that. This question of how we manage these things. So I'm actually going to put on my HHS hat for just 1 second to frame the answer to this, because I think, Matt, you mentioned testing and vaccination, but I bet there were a bunch of other pieces that people had questions about. Tried to capture those that are most often. But I want to start with a framing as we think about everybody thinking about this pandemic, but as we as a university think about how we are managing these health issues as we go forward. I just want to give a public health framework: prevention, detection, and response. And I personally believe we should have framed it this way from, you know, over a year ago, in terms of helping people think about the different pieces and parts. And at all times, you usually need to, especially when you're still in any kind of pandemic or still have any of a disease present, you need to think about all the pieces. And so that is a frame I hope is helpful, that as you think about all the pieces and parts, and I also mention it because it's the prevention part is going to be particularly important as we think about masking and some of the basic public health measures that are pretty important to us. I'll say a word or two about a couple of these, and then Fanta, I'll turn to you to say a bit more. In terms of this question of vaccines and where we are in the vaccines, I think you can see major evolution on that every day in terms of the advancing, everything from the fact that I'm very hopeful that FDA is going to announce the approval of the Johnson & Johnson, a 1-dose vaccine. And so we're seeing that evolution as we go forward. And just as we have learned as we've gone along and kept up, Fanta will probably speak a little more about, we're already engaged in conversations with the other universities in the city to think about that. I think everybody knows where we are now in terms of universities, at least in the district, are not on that core list. Educators in Maryland, it's a little different, and it's different in Virginia. For the vaccinations, we're going to have to watch DC, Virginia, and Maryland and what their rules are, because some of our faculty and staff that are in Maryland may fall under the Maryland rules. We'll be watching the district rules. We'll be watching Virginia, but we're having close conversations with the district that I think Fanta will talk about. On testing, I think you all are probably tired of hearing me say the importance of surveillance testing and the work that we do in that space. We made a big announcement yesterday that many of you hopefully have seen, that we now have testing capacity, and we have set up that testing capacity with a mobile unit that is now stationed at Gallaudet. We partnered with Gallaudet. The mobile unit is there. We're partnering with Catholic University. We are partnering actually with the Baltimore school system. And that is because we believe that testing is so fundamental. It really is fundamental to both prevention, detection, and response, because the testing keys the contact tracing, which will contain. And in a world where it may be a bit before we have the vaccinations, and in a world where there are variants, it is something that we consider very important, and we are planning, and in the budget that we're putting together that I mentioned, we are planning for continuing robust testing in the fall. Fanta, why don't I turn to you in terms of some of these other elements in terms of health protocols for when we are returning, and anything you want to add on the vaccines and testing.
Hello, sorry about that. Having some technical problems. Welcome to the world of technology. When it works, it's beautiful, and when it doesn't, there we go. I just want to say before, Sylvia, thank you. Before I respond to this question, I wanted to take just a minute because spending time with a lot of folks on campus, and still because we're still virtual, one of the things that I'm certainly hearing is really the fact that it's been a year. I don't think any of us thought we would be here still a year into this. And so I think it's important, even though it's obvious, for us to kind of name that. And part of it is, I think we're still grieving, and we're very much grieving because it's going to be almost a year. And so I thought I just wanted to take a minute and to just name that, because I've seen how this has impacted on so many levels. And I think this is something we just need to recognize, and we just need to be here to support each other in the ways that we can, and just kind of take the time that is needed to do so. So I just wanted to start with that, because I think this fits very much within the notion of health and really the larger framework of health. And so with that, in relations to this piece about prevention, detection, and response, you know, the first one is really around prevention, is again, the public health measures that Sylvia has talked about, and how we make sure on campus that there's shared responsibility, and that there's really that community responsibility toward self and each other. And we know that there's going to be a learning curve. We're already seeing some of that. And we're going to have to continue to really all work on that. So that's one of the things. The other things having to do with, we've heard from a lot of you about things like, well, ventilation, what is that going to be like? So our ability to speak about our buildings and our buildings being ready to welcome back folks is incredibly important. So there'll be some communication coming out about what has been done over this period of time. Much of it started in the summer and continued in the fall, so that we can give you that information, because that's vitally important information. And then all of the other things having to do with sort of the guidance around hygiene and everything else, cleaning, all of these things are some of the things that we will be spending quite a bit of time on, and we'll be able to continue to give you reports about that. The other piece I want to talk about is really around detection. I'm not going to talk about testing around some of the detection piece, but the fact that we're able to really ramp up capacity for surveillance testing, and with the detection piece, the other key thing that is also related to prevention is that we have instituted requirements, and we will continue to monitor those requirements and looking at compliance around those requirements. And it's everything from the frequency of testing to then how are we all sort of, you know, in many ways adopting the discipline that we all need when we're on campus and off campus, as we sort of have more students and also staff and faculty who come back to campus. And then we know what are all of the other measures having to do with staggered shift, as Seth mentioned, et cetera, when it comes to workplace. So those will be some of the things that we will be spending quite a bit of time on. And then in terms of response, certainly the piece about isolation and creating space for isolation rooms, but also how do we support students and others during that period of time that is a very difficult time when one finds themselves, you know, when they're in isolation. Also the protocols around quarantine, et cetera. Those are some of the things that we certainly have spent some time on with the fall when we had very small numbers, and that we'll continue to spend some time on. One of the things that we have instituted this spring is what we call contacts with affiliates. And it is really our own internal contact tracing, so that when folks are on campus and there is a case of COVID-19, that we have a team that is immediately reaching out to the person and is also then going through the contact tracing process to identify who else may have had exposure, so that we can really try to contain this as soon as possible. Now, it is my hope that with the vaccine and everything else, that we will be certainly in a better place. But I do think we should be coming into the fall expecting that, yes, we will continue to wear masks. And yes, there will probably be some physical distancing that will be needed as we move back to campus. And I want to also just take a minute to thank some of the faculty and the staff who really have been incredible, resources and have provided immense guidance, whether it's been some of our faculty in the public health and in some of the other areas as well as some of our teams, whether it's in the student health center, the risk management, etc. And so it has really taken a village, and it will continue to take the village as we think about health and safety. So simply to say, much more to come as we proceed.
Thanks, Fanta. Matt?
Great. Our next question, what format will summer classes take?
Actually, Peter, why don't I just turn to you?
Okay, be happy to answer that. The short answer is that most of our classes in the summer will be virtual, but we will have some face-to-face classes as we are having now for people in the arts and in the sciences who really need that experiential hands-on education experience in studios, labs, and so on. There's been a trend over the last several years of increasingly the summer classes are online classes. So we're just continuing that trend. Having said that, I think it's really important to say that we've learned some things from COVID-19. We've learned the value of being more dynamic and flexible in the kinds of offerings that we make in the teaching and learning space. So we are really trying to build the capacity for students to take courses in the summer, to be able to do experiential experiences elsewhere, perhaps in the fall and spring, perhaps study abroad, perhaps internships and placements elsewhere in this country, and then also to be able to take courses in summer just so as to stay on track to graduate on time, which is our goal, our students' goal, and our parents' goal. To that end, and thank you, Doug Kudravetz, for coming forward with the funding for this, we're going to be offering $1.27 million of financial aid this summer. This is a nice, important move towards equity because we normally historically have not offered much aid in the summer. We're boosting the aid that we offer in the summer appreciably, and hope that it can be a more equitable summer experience and that we can serve our students and keep our students on track to graduate on time.
Thanks, Peter. I'll return to you, Matt.
Great. The next question is, will university travel be approved at any point during the 2021 calendar year?
So the travel issue, I was actually just reflecting. This has been the longest period of time since I was 17 that I haven't been on a plane. In terms of the travel issue, I was thinking about it the other day. The travel issue is one where right now we have constraints, and I think everybody knows that in terms of, and these are the constraints we're going to have to continue to watch. So there's what are the rules in DC? What are the CDC rules around travel? And what are rules in terms of different places we go, both within the United States and outside the United States? And right now, the constraints are still very, very high as we think about that. And also, we're going to probably learn more. As you may have read this morning, it seems that the New York variant is a variant, our own New York variant that now exists is a variant that seems to be more transmissible. And so CDC is going to have to think about how to think about those issues. So right now we are where we are, and I think everybody knows that university sponsored travel is suspended through May 7th, and summer study abroad programs right now we have canceled. But I think what we're hoping is that by the time we get to the fall, that later this year we can recommence some travel. But of course we have the constraints that are around us in terms of the rules and where the caseload and the case count. So again, as you hear with all of this, we're on a ramp, we're on a trajectory, we're trying to make sure we're learning, both learning that comes from COVID and CDC, as well as in contact with many other universities to see what they're doing and how they're learning if they're in different places. So this is one we're hopeful that we can recommence sometime in the second half of this year, but we're going to have to watch carefully and where we are. I think we are in a posture of optimism. When you read about people in different postures, I think we're in a posture of optimism is where I would put us in terms of still going to have challenges, as Fanta mentioned. We'll probably still be wearing masks, but be in a better place. Matt.
Great. The next question was perhaps the most submitted in the lead up to the event is, what are the plans for spring commencement?
Thank you. And We know why this is a big question, because this is a big moment, and it is so important. It's important to us. It's important to our students. It's important to their families. It's important to our faculty. It's important to our staff. It is such a core part of a reflection of our mission. It's one of the key things that is highly tangible. And so we are focused on doing everything we can to make this a great experience. And right now, we are doing everything we can to figure out some kind of face-to-face component for students. The constraints in the district right now are constraints in terms of numbers, both indoors and outside. But what we're trying to do is basically put together something that we think we could get approval for in some form. More on that, in the coming weeks, we're going to announce, because we know it's on everyone's mind. People want to make plans, people want to know, but you should know, just like the many, many people that are asking this question, this is something that we're working details, trying to figure out how can we create some type of face-to-face experience for those who want to and can have that face-to-face experience for those students. So working on that, and as I said, within the coming weeks, in terms of when we'll have an answer to that. And we're working to do it as quickly as possible, because we know you want to plan, and we understand that. But we're also, continuing to work to think through how we use different pieces and digital things to make sure that it is a great and memorable experience to honor the incredible work and support, the work of our students and the support of all those around our students, whether that's the faculty and staff or the families of students.
Great. The next question is, when our finances begin to return to normal, will the university consider ways to help faculty and staff recoup lost compensation or address the additional workloads that were taken on during COVID?
So I think the return to normal of our finances, let me kind of start with kind of where we are in the trajectory as part of answering this question. And I just kind of want to review the bidding just to remind everyone. The last quarter of the last fiscal year, in other words, the last months, basically the period from March to the end of June last year, that was about $27 million in losses and increased expenses for the university. I think most people who are probably on this remember that I have said all along, we have to do a 2-year plan for this in terms of our finances. And as we think about things, that this was going to be, even last year I had said, we're going to need to plan for 2 years worth to update everybody and make sure we're kind of working on the same page. We're at a place where this fiscal year, which will end July 1st, June 30th, it'll end. We think that the losses in revenue and the increased expenses will be about $100 million. It's on about a $750 million budget. And as everybody focused on, that's why we had the one chart. I know, hopefully people saw the charts. I don't know if that worked or not. Give us feedback if it did or didn't. But that chart that shows, as a university, we are very tuition and fee dependent as we think through that. And as we're planning for the next year, this coming fiscal year, which will start in July, but will be our fall entering class, we're going to have another year of financial challenge. And as we think about all of that, we have made the commitment, and we believe we can do it, to take the next step to return the retirement money in the new fiscal year, to do merit increases in the new fiscal year. And at the same time, we aren't doing a tuition increase. And so I think everybody kind of understands the math with that. We are counting on the fact that we will, everyone is going to participate in making sure that we have the enrollment and retention that we need, that we continue on our path of our expense savings as we do that. But even to get to that, even to get to the return of those things, it is a stretch in terms of what we're going to do, and we're going to have to keep to things. So the answer to that question of are we going to be able to go back and make up? No, but are we going to be able to go forward in ways as quickly as possible that get people back to where they were that is something that we are feeling good and confident, and we are asking the community, and that's a part, you heard it throughout my remarks, making sure that everybody knows, let's land this class, let's make sure that for our students are here, that we're offering an experience where those students can thrive and they understand the value and why they selected American University and why they're here, and that they're thriving while they're here. And we're all going to be a part of that, as well as that focus on the expenses as we go forward.
Great. The next question is, do you know when the hiring freeze will end?
So it's related to the question that we just talked a little bit about in terms of this question of the hiring freeze and as we go forward. And it's also, I think, related to something we talked about in a lot of these questions, which is evolution, moving forward, changing trajectory. And while the hiring freeze is in place, as we are moving towards everything from our mid-semester experience, where we brought back a number of students, to gearing up for the fall, where we're going to have students face-to-face, what's going to happen is, and also because we've been in the pandemic a year, and Fanta, thank you. I'm going to pause for a second and say thank you for taking the time to recognize and call out, like, it's been a year. It's been a long year. It's been a hard year for everyone, and I don't think we can do that probably enough. But as we think, it's been a year, and so what's critical within a hiring freeze is something that I think we're going to see many more managers and department heads coming forward to say, you know, what is changing, and we are going to have to change some things in order to bring all the students back. There are things that we're going to have to do, and how we think about what's critical will evolve and change. So while that freeze is in place, I think what I'm suggesting is definitions of things in terms of, as we think through exceptions to that, we're going to have to broaden the aperture some as we do that. Seth, did you want to add anything to that?
The only thing I would add, you captured it well, Sylvia, is that as with all things, we're in an evolutionary state. And as we evolve to our plans in the fall with our planning around the workforce and models, we also, the hiring freeze will also evolve. It's crucial to, as you said, to achieve the savings that we need to do all these other critical things, but we're also, it is not in a static state. It will evolve as we match our needs. So just to say that it's still critical, but we will be working with all the units as we have to ensure that we are continuing within the financial parameters that have been set out in the budget, but continue to meet the changing needs of the university as we move into the next phase of operations.
Thanks.
Great. Sylvia, we're coming to our final question, but just so our audience knows that we will continue to collect and answer questions. You can email them to fallfeedback@american.edu. They'll be answered on the website in our FAQs and other forums to make sure that we are trying to address as much of the questions that you have. So Sylvia, our final question is, we've talked a lot about the strategy continuing during the past year. Can you talk about the next steps in that space and how we build on that work moving forward?
Thank you, Matt. And also want to just say, in terms of that fall feedback, if you have specific thoughts or ideas also, you know, as we are getting to the specifics, this is also about input as well. So use that site as well to give us input on ideas or thoughts, as well as your questions. And Matt, thanks for making sure everybody has that. So as we think about this, the next steps in the strategy, I think, you know, as I articulated in the remarks, I think that the strategy has been a very important anchor for us as we have moved forward through this year, and that, you know, we have seen momentum in a number of places. And, you know, there are a number of areas where the crises that we've seen this year have actually accelerated our strategy. And we also have seen sort of a validation of the strategy and people's interest in supporting that. And that was why I wanted to speak about the campaign, because I think that's a really important thing, that those who are close to us, and that's what happens before you have an external phase of a campaign. When we are talking more, we talk to a broader community about where we're going and what we're doing, and we're going to do that. But that endorsement that has come in the form of support for that strategy. And as we think about some of the areas where that strategy has accelerated and where we're going to be focusing, as we think about our lifelong learning, who would have known, Joseph that Peter mentioned, Joseph came on, it was like almost the day when we announced that we were going online. And so that lifelong area of the work that Joseph's working on, the online portion, as we think about some of the other programs, that's a place where the work has been accelerated and is going to continue to accelerate as we think about that. A part of that are the specs changes that we've done, and that you saw the note from Peter earlier this week. That's a place where there's acceleration, and we're going to continue to focus and move forward. I think another place where I would articulate that there's been focus and acceleration is student thriving. And it became different in terms of what its definition and what some of the needs were during this critical period of time. But I think we have focused even more on that, and we're going to need to focus even more on that. We know that this has been a trying time for everyone, faculty, staff, and students. And as we think about that and think about student thriving, we're going to have to focus on that as the community comes back to the campus. For all intents and purposes, we have some people who really only had a half a year and a little bit of their freshman year, their first year of college. We have a group of students who have been online for their first year of college. We have a group of students who will be coming in for their first year. And so how we think about student thriving, that part of the strategy, I think is going to be another important thing that I would highlight. Another area that I would highlight is the work of partnerships. And the idea of what partnerships mean, why we need them, and how we need them. And whether that was the work that is continuing that our School of Education is doing with Trinity here in Washington, D.C., in terms of that partnership work that we're doing, whether it is the working across schools and departments here within the university, it is integral to the community work that we've all been doing. And so partnership is another place. The partnership we just announced with Gallaudet and Catholic in terms of testing, that partnership area is something we've leaned on heavily during this period of time, and I think we're going to as we go forward. It also is another area of the strategy under community, again, is our focus with DC and our engagement with the district. And even though we haven't been here physically in the same way, our engagement with the district has deepened in terms of how we are thinking and working. Right now, many of you probably may know that we're having our campus plan go forward before the district. And so, excuse me, that is another place. And then finally, I would mention our inclusive excellence work as a part of the focus. We just announced years 3 to 5 of the plan right now, but that's going to be another place from the strategy where we are going to have intense focus as a university. And all that, the campaign rides across all of that in terms of becoming the jet fuel to help propel us against all of those strategic elements. So a lot happening in that strategy space as we move and go forward. And the last one I'll mention, and Seth touched on this a little bit, is how AU works. And so we have done an incredible job of being a nimble institution. I think many of you have seen, and I've said it many times, but at the Stern School, a professor was doing an analysis of universities that will go away, that will be in various states of disrepair, will just survive, but AU is in that thrive category. And I think being a part of that thrive category is thinking about some of the things about how AU works. We were very nimble during this crisis. We worked together as a community during this crisis. These sessions in terms of how we are trying to make sure that we're getting input and moving along and communicating about our decisions, how we'll think about space, how we'll think about some of the things Seth mentioned in terms of workforce as we think through what have we learned during this period of time. So that's the last area that I would also highlight. And the good news is these are so many areas of our core strategy that are things that have just been accelerated by where we are. Matt, anything? Nope,
that concludes our questions, Sylvia.
All right, well, I want to, again, end where I began, which is a big thanks to all of you. It's been an incredible year. It has been a very, it's been a tough year. There have been a lot of wonderful things in terms of many of the things we focused on, but it has been a tough year. So thanks, and I hope that you leave excited about the momentum that we have as a university and the impact that we're going to deliver in terms of our mission and our values as we think about how we go forward against where we're going and what we're doing and the change that we as a university are putting out there in the world, both through our scholarship, our research, and how we behave as a community. And want to encourage everybody, we'll be sending out the information that you can join maybe some of the other specific webinars as we go through making more specific what we're going to be doing in terms of some of the details. We've got the broad outline and the framework and the decision-making framework and a number of things in place, but we'll put more and more things in place and want to look forward to your contributions to that. So with that, thank you all for joining us.